Okay, everyone, welcome to the garden. I am so excited about my guest today. My guest is internationally recognized Venezuelan-born artist Claudia Bueno, and she is known for creating these incredible immersive installations. They're technological wonders using light, sculpture, and sound. And I first discovered her work I believe it was through the Jealous Curator, and I was just immediately taken by it. It was a visceral reaction. So I'm super thrilled to be speaking directly with her today. I'm going to talk a little bit about her work while also sharing some images. So bear with me one second. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so can you see the website as the full image? Does that look right?
I can see it. Yeah.
All right. So Claudia's mesmerizing multi-dimensional displays of light and composition transmit a quality of timeless spaciousness that viewers simultaneously lose and find themselves in. This is a piece called Pulse. And in this conversation, Claudia and I are going to discuss how art can connect us with the pulse of life, and also how rekindling our connection with the earth is crucial to our survival species. And I chose this topic because this rekindling and this pulse of life is something that I felt immediately when seeing this work, Pulse. And using lights, motors, circuits, sound, wind, and video, her creations with pulsations and movement are really a unique personal creative language. She uses detailed drawings, meticulous cutouts, and elaborate sculptures that leave evidence of the intimate dedication that she has with her work. And this is really beautiful images of process, creating the work pain by pain, really just beautiful, beautiful process and final piece as well. And through her own intricate process of immersion, Claudia creates large-scale multi-sensory light installations that communicate a profound sense of wonder and awe. They're designed to guide spectators on a contemplative journey into these hypnotic worlds that are populated by signatures of life from micro to macro. And these micro-macro worlds are existing in communion and living as one interconnected cosmic web. There's fluidly pulsating colors and lights and sound as well, making the creations truly come to life. Claudia has been inviting adventure and collecting cultural experiences that enrich her life and inspire her creative process ever since living Caracas at the age of 20. She's strongly committed to inner healing and spiritual growth, something that we'll talk about today. And because of this, she really fills her art with a quality of mystical curiosity. And this mystical curiosity mirrors her personal fascination with energy, consciousness, and nature, and transforming her art really into a celebration of life and the creative force. Claudia is also the founder and designer of Alusik. How do I say that?
Alusik, yeah.
Alusik,
you got it right.
Jewelry, and Compass to Freedom, which is going to be launched soon, a transformational platform that offers creatives coaching, workshops, and retreats. She is surrounded by stunning Teton mountain scenery in her Idaho home, and she creates art and enjoys nature while teaching creativity, healing, and personal growth to her students and her peers alike. And she's a wonderful person, and I'm so thrilled that she's here. Claudia, welcome to the garden.
Thank you for having me, Claire. What an honor to be here, and I love that it was nature that connected us through our work.
Yes.
And
yes.
I can see your garden behind me and sort of my garden behind me. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm going to do a little quick aside and just say that the reason, so I just want to say to the people watching that, and I'm sure as other artists, they will, there's a lot of artists here listening, and I'm sure they'll relate to this, that the first time I saw your work, my first reaction was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I love it. And then the second reaction was like, oh my God, I'm so jealous. And then the third thing that I went to was like, no, I just want to meet this person and talk to her. I am in awe. And we're going to talk about that, but I definitely went through all those three like emotions, and which I think
Thanks
is
for
quite
sharing
common
that.
when you're an artist and discover someone's work that really, really moves you, and your work did. So I want to start kind of at the beginning and ask about your upbringing, and ask you what early memories awakened your own love of nature.
Yes, nature's been part of my life since day one. My parents are both nature lovers, and they always took us out to nature and adventure travels and camping and going to the rivers and the beaches. And so I don't remember, this is not a memory, but I've heard that I think I was something like 2 weeks old. I was just born, and we were already camping in a remote, primitive island away from everybody. And so these are my parents. And my brother and I both grew to love nature and seek it as part of our lives every day, if possible. We find a lot of value in connecting with nature and having it close. And as a family, we all live in different countries. And when we gather, we try to gather in places that are beautiful nature spaces. And they're great containers for us to connect as family and not have distractions that are unnecessary, and just have a beautiful, close, cozy time.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So funny, actually, while you were speaking, I just had this memory. I used to go to Caracas, actually, oddly enough, on holiday. I just remembered this. My father was posted in Suriname, and my mom was like, no, we're not going to Suriname. There was like no school. I think there was just like a dirt road when he was there. It was really rural. She was like, yeah. So I'm not gonna do that. So for yeah, he was there for about 1.5 years, and we would do our family holidays. We would meet in Caracas. Yeah, so that place has like this really tender place in my heart, because it was this time of like reunion when our family was otherwise
so
apart.
interesting.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people have been there, and I imagine it was very different times when you were there.
Yeah.
And for it being a big city as it is, it's got nature everywhere.
Yeah,
it's lush and green and tropical and beautiful vegetation, and the mountains are sticking right out. And so
yeah, that's my memory of it, was just lush and green. So jumping forward quite a bit, I would love to ask you about the time that you spent in Yellowstone, and ask you how this experience of working and being in the Yellowstone National Park, how that fed into your work.
Big time. Yeah, that was a big marker. I got a residency in Jackson Hole in 2015, and I got into a program where they gave me a studio for a whole month, and I got to just explore the area and do a little art show with the art that I did while I was here. And during that time, I got to visit Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Park. They're both nearby, and was completely blown away. Like, nature here is so dynamic and so powerful and so alive. It's like water's flowing from every part of the mountain, rivers everywhere, lush green. It changes every day. The seasons, like once the snow melts, the green just starts coming in so quickly. And like every day you look at the mountains, they look different. Then there's crazy wildlife everywhere, big animals. There's things bubbling up in Yellowstone, steaming pools, and water shooting out from the earth. This place is just insanely alive. And I remember feeling very, very small, very little. Like, it put it all in perspective. And that was a very beautiful, humbling sensation that I had here. And so I took my camera and went biking and hiking all over the place, and just took pictures, lots and lots of pictures of patterns found in nature. Either in Yellowstone, there's these colorful pools that have microorganisms and weird crusty things that grow inside that were very fascinating to me. And then just taking pictures of roots and rivers and rocks and just textures and patterns everywhere. And then those became, here in Jackson in the art studio, they became watercolors and ink explorations. And I always have this feeling that my work has to come out of just the paper into 3-dimensional world. And that started happening by layering layers of plexiglass.
Mhm.
So the first explorations of what is now poles started here in that investigation.
Yeah.
And then nature's been present ever since. My work before was more focused on working with shadows and silhouettes. And somehow that shifted into nature and being connected with nature. And we'll talk a little bit more about what it is now, but nature is ever present as a web of life.
Yeah, I love that. I actually, I've never been to Yellowstone,
Oh,
but
you have to.
I need to go. I was reading a book though called, I think it's called A Brief History of Nearly Everything. It's like this book that kind of covers a lot. It's like popular science, but I got so scared reading a chapter about Yellowstone that I actually couldn't keep reading. I had the same experience. This is embarrassing, but like the same experience that I had as a kid reading one of the Narnia Chronicles. It just got so intense that I was like, I can't handle it, and I like threw the book away.
That's
And I did
interesting.
that with this book because it was talking about like the violence that created Yellowstone in the first place, and sort of like
Okay.
always like looking for the. And they're like, oh, it's a volcanic region, but usually you find like the mouth of the volcano, and then they realize that actually the whole park is
a caldera. It's a super
volcano.
volcano, and you're walking on top of it, and you don't
Yeah.
you just see little portals into it, which are these pools, and you can look in and see the water just bubbling up. And yet something about walking on that fine crust
Yeah.
that feels very fragile and very vulnerable is a very intense, beautiful experience.
Yeah, you said that you felt, I think I forget where I read it, but that you felt like you could feel the earth breathing.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
It's like standing right up on the edge of a nostril into the earth's core. It does feel that way.
That's amazing. Yeah. Okay, I need to confront my fear. Maybe I should reread that chapter and
Come visit. It's beautiful.
Yeah. But I mean, I think it's also kind of, it's like a testament to how amazing the place is that it had such a impact on me, even just to read about it. So the next question I had is, there's a little bit of a preamble. So I had a moment, so very early on in the pandemic, when I was forced to slow everything down. And I had been up to that point super busy, and I was going to be really busy for the next few months. I had thought lots of travel and projects. And in that pause, when everything stopped and like the noise kind of dialed down, I really realized that my way of existing as a commercial artist was really not in line with the kind of world that I wanted to co-create. And I was part of what Sherry Mitchell calls the, quote, the dance of the cannibal giant, which means that I was really very much working within a capitalist framework and kind of obsessed with productivity and always kind of like on the edge of burnout. And even though my art was about nature, and even though my expressed intent was one of environmental stewardship, ultimately my actions were not aligned with that purpose. And I'm really trying to change that, trying to figure out like, how do I, live within this system without also, damaging, like how can I live as a force of good, for healing, right? And it's been this big mental shift for me. And we talked about this a little bit, the two of us, and you mentioned that you had a similar moment in your life where you also realized that you were out of alignment. And I was wondering if we could talk about that moment, and particularly the inner work that allowed you to come into alignment, and how this inner change is reflected also in your artwork.
Yeah, I love that you're bringing this up. And first of all, thank you for noticing that moment for you where things had to shift, because the work you do is very, very inspiring and very important. So I'm glad that that moment happened and you saw it and you shifted what needed. So thanks for that. For me, I really relate to what you just said. For me, it was a little earlier. About 7 years ago, I had been, since I graduated art school, I had been pursuing the formal art career path and working internationally with galleries and trying to show everywhere and work with dealers and have success, this idea of success, 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 right? And it was fun and fulfilling for a long time. And then it reached a point about 7 years ago where it started feeling empty. It started feeling like it had turned into something a little bit more mechanic and intellectual and commercial. And I didn't know exactly what it was missing, but I knew that it was missing something. I was also burnt out because I imagine, like you, just looking at your work, I am highly productive. And when I'm working, I work at full speed and I don't stop. And so normally I reach a burnout, I collapse. And so this came together with a very challenging personal time after moving to, again, for the fourth time, moving countries and going through divorce. And so everything compounded into a very early midlife crisis. It felt like that. And it was challenging, but it was incredible because now I get to live the second half of my life, and it's more aligned with what really fills me. So all of that had to happen all at the same time, shake my world upside down. And yeah, I just went through a time of really just dedicating. I withdrew from art quite a bit. And I just started going in and seeking for tools, guidance, support, because I felt like I didn't know how to handle what I was living. Mm-hmm. I had never learned how to do these things or face these situations. And I went from having never meditated in my life to signing up blindly to a 10-day, really extreme silent retreat where you meditate for like 10 hours a day and you don't engage with anyone for 10 days. And that was it. That was the start of doing the work, which I didn't even know what that meant. And then I started doing my own inner work and very quickly finding a lot of ease and a lot of freedom and a lot of just coping ways that were way better than the ones I had before to come out the other side of these challenging situations. And so I pretty much dove into that and started going on retreats and learning from different teachers and going in classes all over the world. Like that became my priority, really, and it needed to be. And a couple of years after that, once the dust had settled a little bit, I started coming back to art. And this time, the art making started becoming a way of portraying what I had found in those moments of clarity and meditation and those spiritual, mystical experience that came in along the way that blew my mind and expanded my world forever. So art now shifted from being something more, like I said before, more intellectual, like an intellectual take on a topic that I saw, or yeah, I just shifted from that, and it came more down to like a heart experience, and that feels completely different. So I realize now that's what was missing, and the alignment came back in because it was no longer this pursue for success, just no matter what, like I have to make it up, this, this race. It was a race, a competition. Now it's an expression of what I'm discovering, and that feels completely different.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, and I think that's the reason why I wanted to start off, actually, like with the story of how I found your work, was amazed by it, felt jealousy, and then went back to the feeling of abundance, because I think that, and this ties into my next question, is that the mentality that I was working on before was very much, like competition, even competing with myself in a way, right? Like I want to be the best at doing this thing that I'm doing. And I remember being like in those early years, being quite, concerned about, am I doing this well enough? Is someone going to come and do this better than me? Like, as if there's some sort of spring of creativity that's going to like dry up if we all
I so hear you.
Which is ridiculous, right? It's just like the more that you drink, the more there is, kind of, and the more you share, the more there is. So that was and I think for me, I've also been trying to be really conscious about it. Like if I feel these feelings of scarcity, it's like I try to be really forgiving of myself. I'm like, like I've been conditioned my whole life to think about scarcity and competition and capitalism. And I have to sort of be like, you know, often like very mindfully disengaged from it. And
yeah, we have to relearn a different way. And I love that you bring this up, because it really stuck with me when we had our first conversation and you admitted that initially you felt intimidated, and that back some years ago you wouldn't have reached out because you would have felt maybe it would have come from a competitive place.
yeah.
And I've of course experienced that myself many times, and it's very easy to engage in those thoughts of I'm being copied, like someone's definitely already copying my latest work, and what's going to happen when it comes out, and they're going to take my opportunities. You know, I catch myself engaging in these conversations in the head, and then of course you have to bring yourself back to, first of all, it's not, none of that is in my hands. I can't control it.
Yeah.
And if it happens, it happens. And in a way, I feel honored if it happens, because it means somebody connected enough that they wanted to do it themselves.
Yeah.
And so really all we can do is be so truthful to our expression, like really go so close with who we are and our inner dialogue, that our expression is so unique to us that it's never going to be like anyone else's, because we're all unique and created, you know, unique and authentic beings. And so if we stay aligned with that, our creations are always going to be original.
Yeah.
That's like where I bring myself back to every time. Just stay with yourself. That's all that matters.
Yeah. And I think, and by the way, before I forget, I just want to say that we're not taking questions right now, but if any one of the attendees wants to ask us any questions, we're going to have an open Q&A at the end. So just type your questions either into the chat or the Q&A, and we'll open up the discussion then. But yeah, there was oh yeah, another thing that I wanted to just bring up on this topic that we also talked about when we were discussing this was, I think that we both see our artwork in a very similar way, where they're all like, I just started seeing my work right now as being like portals or vessels. Like I'm creating space to intentionally hold space. And then the sort of the materiality of the work isn't the heart of the work anymore, right? So and that, like, that really dissolves the fear of ownership, because I'm almost offering it up into the universe anyways.
Yeah.
And that's really nice. Also. So connected to this question, I have another question. So I'm not from the art world. I had a degree in public policy before becoming an artist. And but I've sort of like watched from outside the art world. I have a lot of friends that are artists. And I remember I took a recent sort of a little mini vacation to the Biennale several years ago. And I found the art world in that space to be quite patriarchal and capitalist and colonialist in its way of being, like surprisingly so. And I see this especially in Berlin. Berlin is just really, really bad about underrepresentation of women and minorities in museums and galleries. But I also see it amongst artists themselves as this sort of scarcity mentality that then gets expressed, I think, as elitism, or like intellectual sort of, you know, like a very rarefied space. And because of this, I'm really kind of trying to shape and mold a way of being an artist that's outside of this framework. Again, we're talking about a space that's built on abundance, on shine theory, on healing, on really a celebration of life, which is why I think that we connected so immediately, because we have that in common. And I was wondering if you could tell me a bit about how you see this abundance and spaciousness as it relates to your artistic practice.
Yeah, what a nice thing to reflect on. My latest experience with, so for the last 3 years, I've been working for 2 projects that just opened in Meow Wolf, Las Vegas. And they were very collaborative projects. So I had a vision, but it took a really, really large team of people to make it happen. And it was a really great opportunity for me to practice opening up to collaboration, because I spend a lot of time alone in my studio just doing my thing. And I think I realize now I was missing out. I was really missing out, because now with these 2 projects, I got to work with people who not only helped me get my vision to where it needed to be, they took it further. And that wouldn't have happened on my own. And so this controlling part of me that just, maybe can be a little bit rigid sometimes, like this is the vision and this is where it needs to go, went somewhere else. It fully expressed itself, but they added so much to it. And the way I see it is, people along the way fell in love with the project, and they poured their hearts into the project and their geniuses into the project. So that exponentially expanded the final expression of it. And it was also a project that allowed me to engage with community. And this piece has been really, really important for me to see the satisfaction, the fulfillment that I got from just watching a whole group of people work with me in the studio. And it just happened to be women. I didn't choose it, but it happened to be that way. And something about all of us just working every day on something that was very repetitive. It had a repetitive meditative quality, because we were painting dots for a whole day or a whole week. That led to the studio becoming a container of vulnerability, really, where conversations became deeper and deeper and deeper. And we took turns sort of processing our own stuff that was going on in life and listening to the wisdom that others had to offer. And it naturally turned into a healing space that I think all of us saw and valued, and really, really, really got a lot out of it that was beyond just making the art. So I understand what you say, like the art sort of became the excuse for this parallel process that was happening, that was accompanying the art and growing the art. But it was as important, now it is as important to me, moving forward, to pursue opportunities that integrate this aspect of engaging community and having a healing element woven into it as just the art itself. Does that make sense?
Yes, I just got goosebumps, because this reminds me so much of traditional practices, right? Like what humans have done for millennia, of sitting and weaving together and working with their hands. And I feel like, what the art world kind of can sometimes condescendingly call craft has so much power in it, right? This sort of meditative circle of working with your hands. It creates magic. And I think that it also creates a magic that is, for me, very much linked to like feminine and intuitive energy, which I think is like what the world needs right now so much. And I think that these spaces, these spaces of meditative handwork, are spaces for nurturing that and bringing it to life. I actually have a really exciting new friend who in Luyan, who's an Argentinian journalist, and she wrote a book called Mastercraft, but she worked in South America with all these different indigenous groups, and sort of was doing a lot of workshops with them. And her book was all about how the process of creating objects in this manner imbues them with power. Like it imbues them with energy and sacredness. And yeah, I really feel that, and I want to do that more. As soon as COVID ends, I want to come back again in these circles of women. There's something really there.
Me too. Yes, there's so much to be discovered there, and like you said, they are so nurturing.
Yeah.
Necessary, so necessary. And I think I just wanted to add that what I noticed after opening up Pulse and just seeing how people are responding to it, people are responding without knowing. I think people are responding to all of this that we're talking about, because a lot of people walk in and immediately feel a sense of connection. And I don't think they've processed yet what that is, and it can be a different thing for each person. but it's all of this that we're talking about. It's the collective effort that took place. It's the weaving of like many hands drawing for months and months and months. It's the conversations around it. It's the healing process that was sort of like propelling this art piece from the beginning. And to me, I'm in a time when I'm observing all of this and just noticing what really is important to me to promote moving forward and to seek out. And so kind of like redesigning this comeback, because I feel like I just came back into the art world, and it's nice to see, to notice like what really is fulfilling and important and relevant for the people, for the community, not just for me.
I really feel that Pulse is a space of intense healing. I have a friend that also does installations, and she was describing her work as acupuncture for the earth, like creating points of shifting the energy around it and creating like healing that kind of also transcends beyond the space where the needle is put down.
I like seeing it that way.
Beautiful metaphor for this kind of work. I also feel like when you were talking, I was like, you're slowing down time. You're like, there's something also really powerful about the pace of what you're doing and how slow and meditative Pulse is, as opposed to the speed that we operate on in every day, which I think is quite disconnecting, right? You're like, you're creating a space where time is operating really at a different way. And that's
and that was a big intention when developing the pace of Pulse, the general mood, because it's also living in a building that's insanely cool and beautiful and trippy and stimulating, which is Meow of Las Vegas. Everything is interactive, everything has high technology. It's wild. If you get a chance to go. So this room to me had to be a place of regeneration, just a place of slowing down and really pausing. Like you say, like time stops. And stimulation stops, and you're just taken, and you just kind of melt with what's happening around. So when we were developing sound, I worked with a really amazing collaborator, and this was the intention, like what sort of atmosphere can we create and what sounds can we bring in that helps that feeling of coming home. Like when you finally take a deep breath and feel that sense of relief, like, oh, like I got here, like I'm here, I'm home. That was the intention behind it. And I think it got closer, it got there, which is beautiful.
I'm just I wish I had this book with me right now, because there's a quote that I want to share with you, but I will paraphrase and just encourage others to check out the book. It's called The Mushroom at the End of the World. And right in the beginning of the book, there was this really beautiful paragraph where she's describing how time operates in a capitalist society, which is very linear and very forward facing and focused on progress. And there's sort of this flattening of all, or like ignoring really of all the other sort of forms that time takes. And it's this sort of forward march, and that's not how nature works, right? Like and this exponential growth curve, and I was realizing, I was like, God, I think so much like that. Just I'm conditioned to think that way, right? Like, what's the end goal? What am I working towards? The forward march. And she has this beautiful passage where she's describing all the other things that are happening as we're focused on this forward march, which is like the time flows of like fungi, or the time flows of rocks and minerals, and the time flows of seasons, right? And that there's all these different variations of how time is operating that we're missing when we're focused on this sort of hyper forward driven capitalist speed, goal oriented. And I think that that's one of the things that sort of moment, because I read that passage and I had to stop for quite a while, actually. I reread it a few times, and I think that pause, that passage that her words brought, is also the pause that your work gave me. Sort of like, oh right, the world is operating on a different pace than what I am accustomed to noticing. Or
it's definitely a new intention in the work that I do. That it creates that space. An invitation that it's just given there, and you can open yourself to it or not, but it's there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
This relates to my next question, which is that viewing your work is such a deeply spiritual experience. And I
Mhm.
was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about your own contemplative practice and how it shapes
Mhm.
your work.
Sure. The first visuals that started coming out in my art that were related to a particular spiritual experience came from the first moments I had in meditation after meditating for many days in silence. When I finally got to experience, we all hear about like body and mind dissolving. And to me, that sounded interesting and very abstract. And I got to experience that little by little. It's like I got a little glimpse of it once, and then I got a little bit of a longer moment with it, and then that started growing. And there was one experience in Bali where I was in a breathwork retreat for, I think it was like a 10-day breathwork retreat, breathwork and meditation. And I had this really incredible experience where um, body and mind completely dissolved. They were gone. And it was the first time that I was able to stay in this place that was no longer me. The individual wasn't there. And this place, what got revealed in this place after thoughts were quiet and I wasn't thinking about my own person and my own stories and none of these self-limitations, what was revealed was it was very visual to me. It was just this black space, empty and full at the same time, and like black and full of light at the same time, if that makes sense. And there was this giant sort of like I call it the charging station because that's what the whole experience felt like. Like I was plugged into this source of light that was just radiating from the inside out, and then it was coming in and it was contracting and expanding and it was going in all directions, extremely dynamic. And it was like I all of a sudden got plugged into this and just like was charging and charging, and my body was buzzing with energy and like sort of like shaking because there was so much energy flow. And I think I spent some minutes there, I don't know how long, but when I came back to thoughts and body, I came back feeling the biggest sense of relief and just like inner peace I had ever experienced. I felt like I had just seen God. And before that, God was something I had to believe in. And after this, I no longer had to believe in anything because I had a lived experience, a reference that it wasn't anything I had to believe. I had just lived it. And that to me was a whole new reference. And so because I saw these visuals and because I got to experience this, I became kind of fixated into painting this, like trying to somehow portray this into my art. And for the last 3 years, that's been the main focus. And Paul's has this area where it's like the center of the whole room. And it is this, I'm trying to portray what I experienced there. It's this womb-like shape that is radiating and moving, and the entire composition throughout the room comes from this. So this turns into natural patterns that turn into neurons, that turn into flowers, that turn into expressions of life, and it's all connected and it's all coming from this one giant source. So my practices to you were asking what are your contemplative practices. So they are practices that help me revisit and remember this. So go back to it because I had this one experience and then I didn't have it for a long time. And so how can I visit this place again? So learning how, because the mind-blowing part of it is that I thought this was only available for the big gurus and people who dedicate their entire lives to spirituality. And what I've discovered is that it's not, it's available to really to all of us. And it takes practice and it takes work and dedication, but if you want to, it's available for you. And so that just opened up a whole new world for me where inner adventures became as exciting as all the outer adventures I was seeking before in international travel and all over the world. So now when I have time to go on a holiday vacation, when I have the resources to spend on a new experience, I'm going for something that takes me in rather than an outer experience. And it just shifted naturally because I have discovered so much in there, and the more you find inside, the more you see outside, and it's just it's a ripple effect. And so of course I'm human like anyone else, and I fall in and out of practice, and I have times when these spaces are really hard to access because I'm having challenges in life and whatever. So they're not always there for me, but I know they're always there. It's just I can't always access them. So it takes some in and out, contraction, expansion, and it's a learning process for me. But meditation, breath work have been the main pillars of my practices. I also love going out in nature alone, just linking it back to the nature piece for us, and hiking and discovering little secret places where no one else is, and just spending time hearing a river, the river sounds next to me, or watching the leaves with the wind. Or I love this is something I learned from my mother and I love it, balancing rocks. So I love going to like a riverbank or a beach where there's really big rocks, and so I pick a rock and trying to find what would be the hardest way to balance this thing, like what is the smallest point that it could balance from, and then trying to do that. And sometimes I can get it and sometimes I can't, and it's nice because it has to do a lot with how much I want to control and how much I am willing to just like feel the rock and let it tell me where it needs to stand.
Yeah.
And you would be surprised, like anything can balance if you give it the patience and the attention, the observation. Yeah.
Oh, that was so beautiful. I just want to like be in a wash in your answer right now. That was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking when you were talking that how we're all divine, like we all have it inside of us. And I really think that there's, I'm really, like probably all of us here, very, very, very concerned about the planetary crisis. And I really do think that the planetary crisis is a crisis of disconnection from ourselves. And I think that this disconnection from ourselves is so painful for us, that it's like a symptom and a cause, right? I actually think it's a symptom, like this like this consumption and this sort of the consumption, this dance, the cannibal dance that's going to really dance us off the planet. I think for me, at least, looking back at the times that I was a more like a good consumer, right, in the capitalist system, I think I was really disconnected from myself, and I felt that I had been displaced from something that I loved and that I needed in order to be happy, right? And then the band-aid that our world gives us is like, well, you need success and you need a job and you need to buy these things, and then this feeling is going to get better, right? But that feeling is really this loss of connection with our inner divinity. Like that's the piece that we're wanting, and that's why I'm so certain that the role I have to play in this moment of healing is that of like of creating spaces to remind us that we're all divine, and that healing will itself lead also to a planetary healing, because I just think as beings we're not getting what we need. Sherry Mitchell talks about this phantom limb, and I think that phantom limb is this connection that you're talking about. Like we all have it and we miss it so much.
Yeah, it's really interesting and kind of confusing, like how we came to forget that we are nature. We're not this separate thing from nature. And I don't know, it confuses me. How did that happen? Because if we feel we are nature, we are one with nature, there's no split, then it's automatic and natural to care for nature because you're going to give it the care and love you give yourself. You're the same thing. But it's when that separation you're talking about happens that you forget you're part of it. You're over here, and then you feel alone and isolated, and you start drowning in your stories and your stuff. And yes, I feel very much that wanting that you feel to contribute to the shift in whatever capacity is in my hands. I have to admit there's a lot of discomfort which is good because it's a drive for creativity, but this discomfort is knowing that there's a different way, yet not fully being able to be aligned in that different way, because it's really challenging to keep it up all the time and to be constant with, what is the highest way all the time. Like, it's like you try to integrate practices into your life that are caring for the planet and good for the world and for the people. And then there's other areas in your life where I feel kind of stuck, like there's no way around it or it's harder. And so the good thing is that there's a lot of people talking about this, and there's a lot of ways to learn. There's a lot of people with the same intention of providing sources that help us remember that
and I think
we
also
are all
gentle.
We are all connected, and we have to care for each other.
Yes, 100%. And I think also I have to remind myself of this too, is that we're still inside this, the new world order, I feel is emerging, but we're still operating and have to, navigate this very, very broken system. But it's been really interesting this year. I've been reading, I'm reading Sacred Instructions right now, which is the woman, Sherry Mitchell, who gave me this beautiful metaphor, which I use all the time, the dance of the cannibal giant. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's really nice to read her book, because she's been raised in a culture that has these words and has these frameworks and nurtures these spaces. And then through reading this book, I really realized there's another way possible of ordering the world, mm-hmm. and understanding the world and being in the world. And that's mm-hmm. been really kind of like the feeling of coming into Pulse. It's been this feeling of relief and returning back to something that's really familiar. Like the best mm-hmm. way that I can describe reconnecting with Indigenous women, with the wisdom of Indigenous women, is returning to a childhood home that you had forgotten, mm-hmm. didn't even know existed, and then you arrive back at it, and it just feels like all the memories come back, and you suddenly feel so at home. Like that's been the experience for me. Mm-hmm. It's probably a very similar experience of walking into Pulse. It's this place, our home, that we have missed, our place in the universe.
That's the hope. That's the hope. And I love that you bring all this in. Mm-hmm.
I feel like we're kind of, the questions touch upon things that we've already talked about, but we'll go through them, and we can, see if there's anything else unearthed. So we both talked in our previous conversation about how we see our work as portals or vessels to another way of being. And I was just wondering if you had any other thoughts about how, how you're purposefully creating these portals and vessels, and what kind of spaces your art opens up.
Yeah, so after what I was mentioning before, observing Pulse and how it was created, everything that happened during the development of Pulse, and then seeing the response from people, I'm designing projects that weave together a healing process with the creative process. And I think it's a very easy thing to bring together. And so I'm dreaming about future installations that are alluding to topics of self-love or the heart or all these things we've been talking about. And so in that way, the installation itself would be the portal to talk about all these other things. And so what I picture is that these spaces could become just spaces that actually host presenters and teachers and guests that come in and talk about whatever topic is relevant around surrounding this one installation, but all focused on these things, these skills that we never learned, or some of us never learned, some others did, but these skills that make life easy and make relationships better and make communication better and help us have more acceptance and self-awareness and grow our self-love and all of these. I never knew these things, and I had beautiful, loving parents, and I went to a beautiful school and had great friends. Like my childhood was wonderful, yet this wasn't part of the program. So I'm having to learn these things as an adult, and I would love to use creativity as a portal to share these things and have other people teach these concepts through art, which is, I find art to be, it's the source of creativity. So it's a great container for that, naturally, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Everything you said is just like ringing all my bells. I also really felt at the beginning of of the pandemic, actually, and maybe a little bit before that too, just this lack of space for being. And I remember talking with a friend. I was like, I feel like I need like a morning group, you know, like for climate, because there was just no space to like to explore these feelings and to hold the grief. And it's almost taboo to talk about these things that we absolutely must talk about, because in order to be fully ourselves. And yeah, I mean, I think that this is part of what this project is about here, right? This garden, like how can we carve out intentional spaces to have these kind of conversations?
Yes, you're doing it.
Hungry for it, right? Yeah.
You're doing it, and it's such a great example to see it and be part of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Because there is your garden behind, and you've spent hours doing what I'm seeing right now, and now it's the umbrella for everything we're talking about and everything you talk to with all of your guests. So
yeah, I want more.
It just holds it.
On every corner.
Yeah, and so to me, going back to that question, like to me, integrating community is a big part moving forward. So coming out of Pulse and 3 years of working with Meow Wolf, I'm really taking time to understand how I want to craft my career moving forward, or my path.
Yeah.
And I know community is a big piece.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that there's also kind of like how you left yourself and connected to this pulse of life, like that incredible meditative state that just sounds amazing. I'm also so curious, like what happens when I let the work go, you know? And yeah, I had an interesting experience. I did this guided meditation before falling asleep, where I actually asked my guides and the Earth Mother to tell me what I needed to make for earth healing. And I dreamt, like, really just, I almost felt like it was like getting homework assignments. Like, make this and then make this. It was so specific. And these, and I the ideas often come in that way, like sort of like fully formed. They feel like instructions, like just make this. And I honestly, like Claire, like me, doesn't come up with these ideas. Like I think that the ideas that I come up with are quite limited, right? Like it's from those meditative dream spaces that the good, I think the better ideas come through. And I think that like really leaning into that has also let me release this idea of ownership, because like, I don't know where ideas come from, like, I don't know, the ether. Right. And yeah, so that's really,
yeah. And I think that comes back to the more you're able to clear yourself inside, clear your stories and your limitations, then the more you're able to channel these ideas.
Yeah. And I
think I can relate to what you're saying. I hadn't experienced it before until Pulse. And then I had a moment when pulse was finally up after 3 years. I was in Vegas and the team had finished putting up all the panels and the lights were on and the sound came on, and I looked at it and I had this feeling of like, this isn't mine. Like I was experiencing it for the first time as anyone else would that was walking in the room in that moment. And it was so interesting and so humbling. Like, yeah, I did this and we did this, a lot of us, but my hands did it and my skills, and they were all just tools that served for this crazy big idea to express itself. That's how it felt.
Yeah.
And so again, it's like, oh, noted. Like, I'm noticing this because it is powerful, and it is powerful because it isn't me. It is powerful because it came from a bigger place. And that's how I'm wanting to approach creativity now. It's like these experiences are little teachers. Like, oh, this is possible. Okay, noted. How can I, and it's just how can I stay open to this, and how can I serve better for more ideas like this to come through? And so that comes with like a big drive and a big wanting to, like, okay, I see that this happened and I see that it's having a great response. I've really felt response, emotional response with people. So what can I do to continue to carry through ideas like this? So that leads me to more commitment to inner work and clearing, and so it's great because it helps my path individually, and then it helps the art.
I love that. I love, like, the word that keeps coming to my mind when you're speaking is spaciousness, like creating space within yourself, and then also inviting in interaction and community also expands the work and creates spaciousness. And I mean, this is a different example, a different art form, but reading the book All We Can Save and then doing these reading circles, it's the experience of gathering in a circle. We couldn't do it in a circle, but on Zoom, and setting that intentional space ended up being like the most transformative experience, I think, ever. And it was an experience that transcended the format, right? And I think that and I spoke with Catherine Wilkinson. She was two sessions ago, and she's like, yeah, you just never know what's going to happen when you release a work into the world. And I think that also that sort of like letting go and letting the work take on this life of its own is also really powerful. And sometimes what happens is just pure magic. I love that. I was going to ask you if there's been any experiences that you've had that have awakened you to the planetary crisis, and if so, how have these experiences informed your work?
One that comes to mind immediately was when I lived in Malaysia about maybe 10 years ago, something like that. I remember being excited to move to this like lush, tropical, exotic island, and it is lush and tropical and exotic, but I remember flying over Malaysia the first time and looking down and just realizing that the jungles had been completely or mostly replaced by palm oil plantations. And then there's burnings every year. And so then there's like really bad air quality every year. Sometimes people have to leave the country and wear masks every day because they're burning in Indonesia, burning in Malaysia. So I think that was the first time that I lived it up close. And also while traveling in the country, noticing how the animals were losing their habitats. They were shrinking because now they don't have a big jungle anymore. They have a little pocket somewhere. And so that made a big mark, and it led me to do a whole exhibition that was based on the idea of extraction and the impact of extraction. And, since then, of course, working with nature, it's something that's ever present. And I also have to admit, I've chosen to live in places that are sort of bubbles and pockets where the people I've lived the last 3 years in Idaho in the mountains, and the people that choose to live here are people who are here because they absolutely love the nature and value the nature and care for the nature. So I go in and out of noticing the impact, because here you don't feel it. And then you hear, of course, you hear it through the news and documentaries. There's so many documentaries right now explaining what's happening. And my brother is a great source of information. He loves engaging in and learning about what's going on. And so he teaches me. And to me, I go from moments of being really open and wanting to learn, okay, what is it that we can do to change and improve and plant our seed and, you know, not damage anymore, where I'm not knowing that I'm damaging because I'm ignorant to something, you know.
Mhm.
And then I have to admit, I get really overwhelmed, because the more you learn, the more it seems like it's very, very difficult. We have a big task ahead of us. And so, I'm of course, I'm slowly shifting and learning, and that's my main goal. And yet there are moments when I kind of need to just take a little bit of space and do what I'm doing and continue my efforts, and then embrace new efforts to the cause. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, I think that, just to say that feeling of overwhelm is that, and this is why I love the All We Can Save project so deeply, is that it's really, it's like, it's a collective effort. It's a we, not an I, and not a you. And that, that it's all about community. And it's like the burden is on all of our shoulders collectively. And that's actually a beautiful thing, because it's like a really gorgeous collective project that we have ahead of us. And then another thing is that, you know, I do it too, where I'm just like mired. I'm like, oh God, I like forgot my water bottle, but I'm thirsty. Like, what do I do? You know, and sometimes I get into these like anguished, personal choice, which are statistically completely insignificant. And I'm trying my best to really like focus that energy onto systemic changes, right? Like how can, like, what groups can I join? What conversations can I start? Amplifier for change. And I think you're definitely doing like so much earth healing through your work. I think that rekindling that you're bringing and that slowing down is important, and the earth needs it.
Thank you.
Yeah. This next question is really fun. So imagine you have limitless resources to realize a project. What would it be?
What would it be? Easy answer, and it's kind of already explained before, but what I would do would be to found a creativity and healing center somewhere where there's a large network of different teachers from different modalities, from the art world, the spiritual world, mindfulness. I mean, you call it health, diet, nutrition. So just bringing it all in through creativity. And I dream of having large projects that involve a whole bunch of people, and again, a program woven into that project that opens up all these subjects and offers all these tools to whoever is doing the project. So I think it's I've been dreaming of this for a long time.
It sounds,
and maybe to some scale it will be manifested one day. Because I do feel like I just keep encountering people who are having the same kind of like urge, like, can we get together? Can we teach each other what we know? Can we learn from each other, like what they know that I don't know? Can we gather? Can we circle? So of course, for me, it would all be channeled through the creativity and the art world.
I'm like, I have this like mental dream board of a retreat that I really want to do. Like, I am all about retreat. Actually, I was talking to Catherine Wilkinson, because she came up with this term, like the climate feminist renaissance. And I was like, how'd you come up with that word? And she's like, well, we did a retreat with all these women climate leaders, but we couldn't call it, what did she say? I think she said we couldn't call it ladies climate camp. And I was like, you couldn't call it that, but if you did, I would bought my entrance fee. It sounds amazing. Because I'm also so hungry for that. Like, just time with people away from screens. And it sounds amazing. I feel like we're I mean, I'm a mother too, to like this, like a kid that just has so much energy. And I often think that all of the problems that he has, like learning how to be like a normal human being, would completely dissolve if we were just living like how we're supposed to live, more in harmony with nature. Like he is so balanced. If we spend the whole day outside and he's like picking berries, like that, I can see it. Like it's like that's his habitat, you know. And I love this idea that you came up with. That sounds amazing.
Well, and there's so much of that already happening, which is so beautiful. Like last year, I got to travel before COVID to Guatemala, and I was really impressed to see a very young generation all into the retreats. The offerings in this place where I was in Lake Atitlan were all about learning how to grow things better, learning about nature, learning about this like breathwork, meditation. Like all the offerings were about improving ourselves, improving our impact on the planet. And they were, what blew my mind was to see that the young people were there doing this. And that sense of jealousy that you were talking about, I had it. I was like, why wasn't I here or somewhere like here, gathering like in this way and dancing? There's a big community of ecstatic dancing, and I found it so beautiful just to see people gathering to dance and chant and all kinds of expressions that just brought people together and connected them in a very, very healthy, heartfelt way. And yeah, I had that feeling like, oh, I'm kind of like 20 years late, but I'm here. So
I just got invited to, like, they're like, oh, you're like a climate leader, we're doing this thing. And I was like, and I read the guidelines. I'm like, I'm too old. But you know what? I mean, no, like I'm all for figure, like, yeah, like I'm up for planting new seeds now. Like at this point in my life, I'm ready.
yeah.
In fact, I'm like so much more ready than I was when I was younger, you know. And there's a question that came in from one of the attendees,
Sure.
and so I'm going to ask I have two, my question and then her question, but they're both kind of interrelated. They're both advice for starting artists. So the first one is if you have any advice for other artists who are trying to combine contemplative practices or earth connections into their work, like any, I don't know.
Yes. I would say spend a lot of time on your own, seek out quietness, stillness, time alone with nature. Observe, like to me, observation, just pay attention, like slow down to the point where you can really see. Nature has all the information you need, I think, to learn how to be an artist. It has color, composition, light, movement. All of it is there. And if you pay close attention, you can learn so much from it and dive in, because the more you go in, like I said before, I feel like the more you go in and the more you discover inside of you, the more you discover outside as well. And we're often really scared of going in because it can be intimidating. We don't know what's there. We have a guess that there's some shadows and maybe some monsters, and we don't know how to deal with them. But none of that is gonna harm. Diving into that stuff, that space is never gonna harm you. What's gonna harm you is to keep it all down there. So I would say open up and start peeling the onion that you have inside, because there you find freedom. And as you find freedom, your creativity finds freedom too, and your authentic expression finds more voice, more expression. So that would be what I would suggest. That's what's worked out for me.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. From India, you have a question. What would be
India?
Your suggestion, or advice for aspiring young artists like me? It looks like it would take some long time to come to the stage you are in. Thank you for this conversation.
Thank you for that question. Yes, art is, I feel, at least I can only speak from my experience, but it can be a really long career. And I think it's a career of very, very, a lot of patience, just perseverance, staying with the art, staying with the work, and coming back to it, and going to the studio and checking in. And even when you don't feel creative, go in and do something. Just have creativity open all the time in your life, even when maybe you aren't doing your masterpieces, but like just keep the engine going. But perseverance is what I would say. Just stay with it, and try to be as authentic as you can, as true to yourself as you can. Like, don't get so much lost in the race that we were talking about before, and the competition. And I remember having a lot of moments of doubt because you would see another artist that you felt was way better than you, and you could never be like them. And so then that starts crushing your own expression because you're trying to be like somebody else, but you're not being you. So I think the most success is going to come when you're able to be the most true and authentic to who you are, what you feel, what you experience, and what just gets expressed from you, not influenced by anything else or not trying to be anything else.
Yeah. And
would you add anything to that, Claire?
I made really, really bad art for a very long time. So, and there's this quote by Ira Glass, which I will paraphrase, but he talks about the gap. Like, when you start any creative endeavor, you start it because you have good taste, right? So you like know what you like. You start making it your work, and it's not good, and you can tell it's not good. And there's this gap between like your taste and your ability. And he says, you know, a lot of people, they give up when they see that gap. They're like, well, I'm not any good. And then you just keep working, and eventually the gap gets smaller, and until one day you're like, oh, okay, actually my taste and my ability is more or less aligned. And I mean, I definitely,
that's really great.
Yeah, it was like such an accurate description of, like, you know,
also because you find in the beginning you're kind of like shooting arrows everywhere because you don't know what your thing is yet, and so you're just trying this and trying that and collaging and painting and trying this style of painting and this other style of painting, and then eventually you start seeing what works and what's yours, and you start focusing on that and not so much on everything, and so you start improving your own set of skills and perfectioning what you're really good at, but you have to discover it first. So I think, getting through that initial phase of experimentation is very important, getting through it and to the other side of that.
And it's okay to, I mean, I think something that I also like noticed in retrospect is that this time that felt really creatively dry for me, I remember like during that time, I used to obsessively go to like natural history museums, and I think without realizing it, I was like doing this visual research that I pull on constantly now. And it kind of like reminds me of plants, right? Like, they can be germinating underneath the surface and you don't know that anything's happening. It feels like nothing's growing, but actually like seeds, you know, like the seed is sprouting and the roots are going into the earth. And there's
same. I feel like my best work has come out of these last years when I've isolated myself, and you know, people ask me like, who are current artists that influence your work and what are you into? And quite honestly, I don't know what's going on in the art world because I've been isolated in Idaho in my own little nature creative bubble, and in a way I had this guilt, like, I don't know what's going on, I don't know what's happening in the art world. But on the other hand, I feel like the work that came out of this time was really authentic because it was just me. There was no, like you said, there was no visual research that I was doing in the meantime that could have influenced the process. So it worked for me. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that like that connection back when you connect with nature and you're connecting with yourself, and then your art comes from that space. That like that feeling of scarcity or comparison almost goes away because you're just like connected to something that's almost outside of it. It's really nice. Yeah. Well, I think that's, and my last question for you was if you have any upcoming shows or news or ways that folks can stay in touch with you and keep up with your work.
It's kind of an incubator phase right now. There's nothing that I can announce yet. There's potential leads on public art projects, and there's also going back to, you mentioned the Creative Unlock and the retreats that I was working towards just before COVID. I had actually set up my website, and I was in Guatemala checking out venues for retreats for creativity and spirituality. So all of that is kind of brewing and about to come soon. But right now, nothing yet. Unfortunately, I can't say this or
okay.
that. I am doing.
This space doesn't care about productivity in the garden.
Stay tuned.
Yes, we're in the and roots.
Yeah, and I've been doing small versions of pulse. So that's what I'm actually working on right now, hands-on for, there's people who walk into the room and are left with the feeling that they want a piece like that in their home. So I'm doing small iterations of that.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say something about this, like the no news thing and the sort of like the apology that feels like it has
to like
I just want to say like don't apologize. I think that and I'm saying this also to myself because I am also definitely in a phase where like I went out to nature the other day and usually I'm there and I'm like, oh, like I want to do something that looks like that, and I'm just like really like the inspiration to idea is like so direct usually, and these days it's just not. Like I just want to be like a fern and be in it and there's definitely that like clear, like where's the spark, where's the plan, what's the where are you moving forward? And I think that that I am trying also to myself to like release that expectation of that linear thinking that like there has to be something huge on the horizon that I'm working towards. And
thanks for the reminder.
Yeah,
you're right. No apologies.
Let's be like forests. We're taking our nourishment from the things around us, and maybe eventually a really beautiful mushroom will pop up, but that's not our job. I think I have to really remind myself of that too, because I think the pressure to have something and have something on the horizon is I'm also struggling with it right now because it doesn't feel like the right time to do that. So I just wanted to say that. Yeah.
Thanks for cutting me some slack.
But this was so wonderful, and I'm so glad. And this is not going to be the last time we speak. I'm really excited to collaborate, and I'm trying to.
Me too. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to what's next.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for everyone who joined us. I don't know who was there, but thank you for listening and being there to support these conversations. Sorry?
I said, and I'll be sharing this on social media and YouTube as well. Claudia, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye, Claire. Bye.
Bye.